Well, howdy folks, Elcrex here, and welcome to Mercenary Thoughts from the Inner Sphere, episode 152. And today we're going to be talking about that iconic mech that everybody likes to make fun of, but everybody seems to have one and really likes to talk about it. It's the Urbanmech. It's the baby of the imp with the... Well, it's like if the imp goes around and lays a bunch of eggs, then Urbanmechs are what has to survive into adulthood until it becomes an imp. Yeah, it goes through all of its iterations of growing up and evolving. It evolves. Now, the Urbanmech is kind of an interesting little mech. It definitely has a niche. It's not something you're going to see very often out in the wild. Most likely because it's a city dweller. It's one of those mechs that likes to sneak around, hides in alleys, and hides in the shadows of the sewers and stuff like that, because if it gets out into the wild, other large predators come along and eat it before it grows up. So, the Urbanmech, if you want to go back and look at some, like, what was it? Yeah, episode 52, 100 episodes ago. Interesting. So episode 152, we're going to be talking about the Urbanmech. Yeah, interesting how that evolves. Now, the R63 Urbanmech is 30 tons. It has a 232 movement still has the 11 heatsink, still has the 96 armor value. Then it has some upgrade. Well, okay. It has an LBX 10 autocannon in the right arm and a ton of ammo in the right torso. And then it has a small pulse laser and a small laser. So basically, they downgraded the LBX, or the AC-10 in favor of the LBX-10, and which gave it, another ton. And then they put a small pulse laser on it for more enclosed protection. And so it's interesting. Now the LBX, obviously it's a cluster weapon, and in this case it's one of those mechs where you have 1 ton of ammo, so you have to make a decision. Are you going to use it as a 10 LBX 10 shotgun, or you're going to use it as a solid shot autocannon? So most likely, most people will probably go with the solid shot. No, you can go with the LBX, shotgun ammo, cluster ammunition. You'd be running over on the 10 cluster chart, and every time you hit, and you got a -1 to hit, so it makes it a little easier to hit your target. But you're just scraping off lots of different places for armor on a mech, unless it already has damage to it, or you're doing a wolf pack operation, because this thing only runs at 540 battle value. So for the cost of some of the heavier or assault mechs, you could bring 4 of these for an urban fight and wolf pack them up. So you have a couple with some solid shot, a couple with the cluster munitions, and just start hammering away at targets. So you're running down yeah, that's kind of funny. Walking or running doesn't matter. It's equivalent of most mech. This thing running is equivalent of another mech walk, going down a street and then just banging away, and then dive in, hide until something gets closer, then step out and hammer away. It's kind of like what this mech has to do, as it says right in its name, the Urbanmech. Typically, if I see one of these things, somebody brings one of these and brings it into an open terrain type of game, it doesn't last very long. It's one of those, it's like, oh, okay, you got a slow 30-ton mech that at best it's going to have a 1, maybe 2 modifier to hit it. Even at extreme ranges, it isn't long for the world. This armor value isn't all that great, because you look at, like, the arms, it only has 10 armor in each of the arms, so you hit it in the arm a couple times, and the odds are you might not have that autocannon anymore, or even that small laser. And it's gonna be just like, okay, it's not even a threat anymore, other than when it tries to get close enough to try to kick. And by that time, you're like, I'll just scrape it off and get rid of it, type of deal. So it is, like I said, I typically like to use this thing. Even with a 2 jump, it's not much. So you can't go jumping over a lot of buildings, or because typically most of the buildings that I ever played with are levels 3 to 6 to even 8 sometimes. You get some of the bigger city complexes that I've played before. Even most of the buildings I have are like level 4s, 5s, and 6s. So this thing is forced to walk or run down streets to get around. And it's not, even the 2 jump jets isn't really going to help it too much. In most cases, unless you get into a suburban factory area where a lot of the factory buildings or warehouses are not that tall. And then it might be able to get on the roof, get on the roof. It may not even be able to clear the building. So, yeah, it's one of those things where this mech has to be an ambush mech. You have to sit around, wait for the target to get close enough, come out to where you need it to be, and then you can jump out or step out and hammer away at it. And if you have a wolf pack of these things, and then they can jump all over them and hopefully do some damage to it before 1 or 2 of them get wiped out. Because I can guarantee you a heavy or a assault mech would make mincemeat of these things. And once they're engaged, they're not escaping. They're like expendable. It's like expendable trash cans kind of thing. Little R2-D2s that can. And they... which brings up an interesting... they even have plush toys. Urbanmech plush toys. Interesting. One of the days maybe I'll get one. But that's the thing, is that this is a mech that once you engage it, it's done. It's like a lawn dart. You focus, you throw it, and then fire and forget type of weapon system. Because once it's engaged, it's not going anywhere. You get medium and light mechs are just going to dance circles around these things, and you might get some damage off in the meantime, but eventually it's going to get worn down and taken out. You face one of these things off against a Phoenix Hawk or something of that nature, even a spider with the same tonnage. The spider's going to be roaming around and just taking him down pretty quickly. And you might get lucky enough to get a couple hits in, but in the meantime, you're probably losing a mech or 2. So, now we have a couple others. So let's just take a look here. There's a whole plethora of variants. We have, the previous version, which was the UM-R63, which is in the 3039 book or 3025 book. And it's the same mech, except the only difference is that you have the AC-10 and a small laser. You don't have the small pulse laser. That's the difference. Which beg the differ is like, okay, maybe they thought that this thing wouldn't last very long on the battlefield, so that's why they gave it the small pulse laser instead of another ton of ammo. Because personally, I'd like to have the option if I want to shoot the autocannon as a cluster or a solid. If I had another ton, okay, it's not going to last that long, so maybe they're looking at maximum amount of firepower to throw down range up close as you step out and ambush something. But I'd rather have the option of punching holes at a longer range or hitting somebody with a cluster munition. Give me the option. That's one way I always look at this thing. Now, okay, let's look at some variants of this. We have the R60L, which is a Capellan iron. This one, which is kind of interesting. They modify a few of their Urbanmechs And what they'd done was they sacrificed 2 tons of armor, upgraded the AC-10 to an AC-20. Yes. They kind of probably recognize the fact that this mech isn't going to last very long, so they just turned around and said, okay, here you go. Here's an AC-20, step out, hit with it, if you could hit with it. You know, I always said that the AC-20 is kind of a gambling weapon system because you got so much tonnage wrapped up into a system that is short range and maybe will hit. If it does hit, if you hit a light or medium, even a lot of heavy mechs with an AC-20, they're going to know it. A light mech getting hit with an AC-20 is probably going to take off an entire side. It's like you hit Locust with an AC-20, it's going to lose an arm and a torso and possibly even a good chunk of the center torso just with one hit. And if you hit it, a light mech in the center torso, it's almost probably a done dinner depending on the tonnage of the mech. So that is a good option. You know, like we said, I was talking about the Wolfpack configuration of, like, say you have 4 of them. If you had one in there within an L variant with the AC-20 amongst 2 of these and maybe a standard or something of that nature, or even 3 standards in one of the L versions, that would be an interesting thing where, you know, you're tearing things up. If you hit a mech that's moving kind of slow, like a heavy or an assault, yeah, one of these things is probably going to get obliterated when the assault fires back, but it's going to know that it got hit. Alright, here's the R63. This is another Capellan. This one is a field modification of which replaces, oh, this is the one, yeah, here, we just already talking about it. This is the one that they upgraded. Wow. Then we got the R68. This is a Draconius combined. This is an interesting one. It has the MRM-30 with 2 tons of ammo. Yeah, the MRM-30. Yeah, you take all that tonnage that you normally would throw into that autocan, you turn around and throw it into a missile system. Yeah, this thing can do some severe amount of damage. I kind of like this idea of this one. I have yet to use it, but it's very intriguing to me when I've looked at it a few times. It's like, maybe it might be something to think about. Tossing out there sometime just to play with. Okay. Then we have the R69. This is from the Free Worlds League. This one has the Ultra AC-10 and a small ER small laser. So basically, they upgraded the autocannon. It also upgraded to 5 tons of ferrofibrous armor, removed a heatsink, and then you know, that's basically what they did, was they used the ferrofibrous and got rid of the heatsinks so they could upgrade that autocannon to an AC-10. But you're still running around with a single ton of ammo on that version, and that can be a major problem because you're talking about a short-term amount of firing. But we go back to the old saying, is like, this is a slow mech. Once it's engaged, it's probably going to die. So having only a single ton of ammo on board, yeah, it may not be such a drawback anyways. If this thing lasted 5 turns, I'd be surprised. You know, be honest with you. Alright, then we have the R70, which is the Federated Suns version, upgraded. Uses ferrofibrous armor, has the Rack 5 Rodeo Autocannon 5, which can fire up to 6 times its normal rate of fire and carries 2 tons of ammo. And so you got, let's see, that's 40. So I guess you could fire that thing. Odds are, if you fired it 6 bursts, it's going to jam one of those times. Because every time you fire it, the odds go up. And I think it's like if I remember right. You fired an autocannon. You got a jams on a 2, and I think if we fire it 5 or 6 times, it jams on a 3. And most times I've ever used a rack 5, I've jammed the thing. Typically, I might get 2, maybe 3 bursts out of one of those things where just roaring away with it. But by the time you make about the 4th or 5th time you're using one of those things, I would always going to roll a 2 or 3, and then it's jammed. So then you're like, oh, well, this is wonderful. Then you got to spend a turn without moving, trying to hit the darn thing as the equivalent of the mechs, slamming on the weapon system, unjam it. Yeah, that can be a problem. Alright, then we have, okay, then there's the AIV, or the A4, which is the one that carries the Arrow 4 system. This mech has an Arrow 4 launcher, an ER medium laser, so we're talking around, I think this is 3060 era, roughly. It has Indo steel, and a this entire mech carries 10 rounds for the arrow, so two tons of ammo for it. This one is kind of turns it into a mobile fire support system, artillery. Not bad. So if you got it into an urban environment, okay, you don't necessarily have to have line of sight. You can just park it someplace in the back, launch the arrow missile system at somebody, hammer grid squares, and then when it's empty, you can walk it off the board to reload, and then maybe come back sometime if you're playing that type of campaign where you can walk off and do a reload and then come back on and fire again. So that isn't a bad one. It's like the R68 and the A4 version are kind of the ones that I like, is the role of fire support. Now they have some good firepower with them. Then we have the R693 version, which is a Dark Age, which we don't like to talk about, but let's just ignore the fact that it's Dark Age. This Urbanmech has a plasma rifle, an ER medium laser, and an ER small laser. Has hardened armor, and pretty much one of those ones that helps him make it impervious to a lot of attacks, light attack stuff. So, which is a kind of an interesting thing. I like the idea that it uses the plasma rifle instead of the autocannon, which is kind of like to say what I would do with this thing. Alright, we have what I've done with this with Urbanmech now that we've moved up into a newer technology era, which I've run before. It is, you take the standard Urbanmech, with the AC-10, 11 heat sinks and everything. Drop off the autocannon. It's an autocannon that's going to do 10 points of damage. What out there does 10 points of damage and has a decent amount of damage? It does 10 points. Oh, it's called a PPC. Alright, you can replace it with a standard PPC or an ER PPC. The ER PPC is going to give you some better range, so you can fire down farther down a street. You're saving a bunch of tonnage. And what I've done with it is I increased its movement to a 353. So you increase its ability to get over buildings a little bit better, a little bit more speed, so its walking speed at least gives you a modifier. And then I gave it a Guardian ECM and a couple medium lasers instead. And it has maximum armor, 105 points of armor, which is kind of nice. And, oh yeah, double heat sinks. Must have double heat sinks. And it still has the 11 double heat sinks, so I didn't change anything out. You could drop it to 10 doubles, but it was one of those things where it's like, okay, we're talking about field modification capability, so this standard armor, and to give it just the extra heat sinks, just replacing them in there, and then with the ERPPC. Oh, and with the tonnage extra, you can always upgrade the engine. So now you got a 353, and that's one version I've used over the years as a good Urbanmech. It's slowly evolving into it's at that stage where it's evolving into its next iteration along the line, and if somebody gets up close to it, you can still fire a PPC and 2 medium lasers and do 21 heat, and you can dissipate 22. So it's one of those ones that's kind of well balanced. And with that ECM, it helps it against Artemis and any of those nefarious scouts running around that have that C3 network. You can help shut it down. Create that little bubble that shuts stuff off. Now, if this thing fires all of its weapons and jumps, yeah, it's going up through what, 3, 2 up in the heat scale. So, yeah, it's not a big deal. You can do that for 2 turns and still fire everything. So, it's not a deal breaker by any means. So, that's kind of my thoughts on the whole Urbanmech. It can be upgraded to a better weapon system. Heck, you could even think about taking a standard 2-3 Urbanmech and give it a like a large laser, an ER large laser for that matter, and then throw more close weapon systems onto it. So, heck, you could give it machine guns if you're so inclined for taking on infantry. So imagine, give it a large laser, ER large laser, save a bunch of tons, and then upload it with a whole bunch of machine guns. So if an infantry squad decides to get anywhere near it, you just unload on the things and rip them to pieces. So that's a good option right there. So that is the Urbanmech in a nutshell. Not a bad little mech. Everybody likes to make fun or jokes about it as its evolutionary process, but you know, it's kind of a mech that can be tossed into a game. It's like if you got a city fight and you got a few extra points, you're trying to figure out what to do. You can't go wrong with an Urbanmech. Just go in knowing that it's like, yeah, you might get a turn or two of fire at it before it's obliterated. It's a kind of a fire and forget weapon system. But it's fun to play, and it's kind of iconic and fun. Alright, hope you guys like it. Like and subscribe, and share with all your friends, and we'll see you in the next one. Hellcracks out.